The pool speaker exploded in a shower of sparks as Sandra Mitchell's garden hose struck its third devastating blow. Connor Blake's carefully planned memorial celebration scattered into chaos as she screamed about illegal noise terrorism while neighbors fled his backyard like a crime scene. "This ends now," Sandra shrieked, wielding her HOA violation folder like a weapon. "I'm shutting down this public disturbance before someone calls the real authorities." But as Connor watched her destroy his sound equipment, his municipal radio crackled with an incoming noise complaint. The same address. His address, filed by someone claiming emergency noise violation, who had no idea she was targeting the one person in Colorado with actual authority over every decibel limit she was attempting to enforce. What Sandra didn't know was that Connor had been measuring sound levels professionally for 8 years, and her attack had just handed him everything he needed to end her HOA reign of terror. What Sandra didn't realize was that Connor wasn't just some neighbor throwing a loud party. He was the certified municipal officer who wrote the noise ordinance enforcement protocols she was claiming to know. By 8 p.m., Sandra would be explaining to real police why she'd filed false noise complaints and destroyed city equipment. Connor would be watching her expertise crumble under actual acoustic measurements. And the $25,000 lawsuit that followed would teach every HOA busybody in Colorado the difference between actual noise violations and personal vendettas. The noise control system Sandra tried to weaponize would become her legal nightmare. You know, I've dealt with some interesting neighbor disputes in my years as a noise control officer. But what happened that June afternoon in Oakwood Heights was something else entirely. If you've ever had to deal with someone who thinks reading a few online articles makes them an expert on municipal law, you're going to want to hear how this particular power trip ended. Because sometimes the universe has a perfect sense of justice. Connor Blake understood. Sound like a musician understands melody. 8 years as the county's senior noise control officer had taught him that acoustics weren't about opinions or neighbor complaints. They were about science, measurement, and community harmony. At 36, he'd investigated thousands of noise complaints, mediated neighbor disputes, and testified in court cases involving sound ordinance violations. Today's gathering held special meaning that went far beyond just another backyard party. June 15th marked his father's birthday, Staff Sergeant William Blake, who died in Afghanistan when Connor was 22. Every year, Connor honored his memory with a backyard celebration that brought together neighbors, veterans, and community members his father had loved. The tradition had become sacred to him, to a way of keeping his father's spirit alive through the community connections that had meant everything to the man who'd raised him. Connor took pride in following regulations precisely, especially when it came to something this personal. His sound equipment was professional grade, calibrated annually by the same technicians who serviced municipal systems, and operated within strict guidelines that he'd helped develop. What he couldn't tolerate was people who confused personal preferences with legal violations, especially when they used fake authority to destroy meaningful community traditions. Oakwood Heights embodied Colorado suburban living at its finest. Located in Jefferson County, the development featured upscale homes with spacious yards perfect for community gatherings. Mountain views and outdoor lifestyle made noise management particularly important for maintaining neighborhood harmony. But most residents understood the balance between community celebration and respectful volume control. The HOA governed 180 homes with monthly fees of $225. Most residents appreciated balanced community standards that protected property values while allowing normal family life. But recent board elections had attracted personalities who treated minor violations like federal crimes. The community's proximity to Denver made it popular with military families and government workers who understood the importance of both community celebration and noise responsibility. Summer gatherings were common and generally welcomed by neighbors who appreciated Connor's careful attention to volume limits. The memorial celebration had been Connor's tradition for 6 years, growing more meaningful each time. Every June 15th, he'd host friends, neighbors, and fellow veterans to honor his father's memory with food, stories, and carefully controlled music that never exceeded municipal noise limits. The gatherings had become neighborhood highlights, bringing together people who might otherwise never connect. This year felt particularly important beyond the usual emotional significance. Connor had recently been promoted to senior noise control officer, and the celebration represented both professional achievement and personal healing. His father would have been proud of Connor's career, helping communities resolve conflicts through proper regulations rather than personal animosity. The promotion meant Connor now oversaw noise ordinance enforcement for the entire county, making him one of the most qualified acoustic specialists in Colorado. The party represented everything Connor valued: community connection, regulatory compliance, and honoring military service. He'd spent weeks planning the perfect acoustic setup, professional sound equipment calibrated to stay within 45 decibel limits during daytime hours, with automatic reduction protocols programmed for evening transition. Every speaker was positioned to minimize sound bleed while maximizing clarity for his guests. The system was essentially a demonstration of how professional knowledge could create perfect community harmony. His relationship with neighbors had been positive until Sandra Mitchell joined the HOA board 8 months ago. Since then, his peaceful community life had become a series of manufactured conflicts over imaginary violations. Sandra Mitchell wielded her HOA position like a shield against chaos she couldn't control elsewhere in her rapidly deteriorating life. Recently divorced and fighting a bitter custody battle over visitation rights with her grandchildren, she channeled her frustration into neighborhood enforcement with the desperation of someone who'd lost control over everything that mattered. As HOA Compliance Director, a position she'd created and appointed herself to, Sandra treated every community gathering like a potential violation waiting to happen. Her 3 failed attempts to regain custody had been partially attributed to inability to maintain safe, quiet environment for children. According to family court documents that had become her obsession, every noise complaint Sandra filed was really about proving she could create the controlled environment the courts had deemed her incapable of providing. Connor's celebrations represented everything she'd been told she couldn't manage: community, joy, and controlled celebration. The irony was that his gatherings were exactly the kind of positive community engagement that family courts typically wanted to see. But Sandra's trauma had twisted that into a threat rather than an example. Her husband had left after her increasingly erratic behavior during the custody proceedings, taking their adult children's support with him. Sandra's isolation had only intensified her need to control her immediate environment, and the HOA position gave her the first taste of authority she'd felt in months. The attack began at 2:30 p.m. during Connor's tribute speech, shattering what had been a perfect afternoon. 15 neighbors had gathered around his pool as he shared stories about his father's community service, when Sandra's voice cut through the afternoon like a chainsaw through silk. "This illegal noise violation ends immediately." She marched across his backyard carrying a garden hoe and official-looking documents that she waved like court orders. "I'm conducting emergency enforcement under HOA Noise Abatement Protocol 7C. Connor paused mid-sentence, instinctively protecting the microphone he'd been using to address his guests. The interruption felt like a violation of something sacred, turning his father's memorial into a confrontation none of his guests had signed up for. "Sandra, we're well within daytime noise limits. This is a private gathering on private property. Actually, as compliance director, I have authority to shut down public disturbances that violate community standards." She gestured toward his professional sound setup with the confidence of someone who'd clearly rehearsed this moment. This commercial-grade equipment clearly exceeds residential noise allowances. Grace Kim and several neighbors watched nervously as Sandra approached Connor's carefully calibrated speaker system. The tension was palpable. Everyone could sense this was about more than just noise levels. "Show me the specific violation," Connor said calmly, his professional training kicking in, despite the personal nature of the attack. Sandra raised the garden hoe with theatrical determination. The first blow shattered Connor's main speaker in an explosion of sparks and plastic fragments. Veterans and neighbors scattered as Sandra continued her assault on his sound equipment with the fury of someone who'd been planning this destruction for weeks. "Illegal amplification devices removed under emergency authority," she screamed while attacking his mixing board with methodical precision. "I'm filing formal complaints with police, code enforcement, and municipal noise control." Connor felt professional rage building, the same fury he'd experienced watching people destroy community events through ignorance and false authority. Sandra was demolishing expensive city-calibrated equipment while claiming violations that didn't exist in any municipal code he'd ever written or enforced. "Sandra, you're destroying municipal property and filing false reports. I'm protecting this community from your noise terrorism. Real authorities will appreciate my enforcement action." She pulled out her phone and began recording her destruction as if documenting evidence for court proceedings. documenting removal of illegal sound equipment that violated multiple noise ordinances and endangered community welfare. Connor's municipal radio crackled with an incoming complaint. The same address. His address. Filed for emergency noise violation by someone who clearly had no idea what constituted an actual emergency. Connor pulled out his municipal badge and calibrated sound meter with the calm professionalism that had served him well through 8 years of dealing with difficult people. Since you're concerned about noise ordinances, let me show you something professional. Sandra paused her destruction. Garden hose still raised menacingly. What's that supposed to be? My municipal noise control officer credentials. I'm the senior acoustic specialist for the entire county. Every ordinance you've cited is either non-existent or incorrectly applied. He began documenting her equipment destruction and false reporting with the systematic approach that had made him one of Colorado's most respected noise control specialists. You've just destroyed calibrated city equipment during a compliant community gathering. Sandra's confident expression flickered like a candle in sudden wind. That's impossible. I researched all the noise regulations. Your emergency protocol doesn't exist in any official documentation. Want to see the actual municipal codes? Connor accessed his municipal database, showing Sandra his 8 years of noise control certification with the patience of someone who dealt with similar delusions before. Complaint after complaint appeared on screen, thousands of investigations, mediations, and enforcement actions he'd personally conducted throughout Jefferson County. Sandra, I wrote the noise enforcement procedures you're pretending to follow. The commercial equipment violation you claimed? This system is calibrated to operate at 38 decibels, 7 decibels below daytime residential limits. The illegal amplification you attacked? It's the same system I use for municipal compliance testing. He showed her his real-time sound measurement readings on his professional meter. Current ambient noise level is 35 decibels. Traffic on Colorado Boulevard generates more sound than my gathering was producing. Sandra stared at the official documentation, her confidence visibly cracking as reality began penetrating her manufactured authority. But I researched everything: HOA forums, noise complaint websites, community ordinance guides, none of which are actual municipal regulations. Connor explained with the patience he'd developed through years of educating confused residents. You've been citing blog posts and opinion articles as legal requirements. Connor pulled up his enforcement history for Oakwood Heights on his tablet, showing Sandra the reality of actual noise control work. I've investigated 27 noise complaints in this community over 5 years. 0 resulted in violations because residents generally respect actual noise limits, not imaginary ones. His radio buzzed with a message from Lieutenant Torres. Heard the complaint call. Everything good? Connor typed back. Better than good. She just handed me a harassment case and equipment destruction evidence. Sandra wasn't retreating despite the mounting evidence of her mistake. Connor's revelation seemed to trigger deeper desperation as she realized her authority was being challenged by actual expertise she couldn't dismiss or intimidate. I don't care about your supposed credentials. HOA authority protects residents from noise pollution that municipal officers ignore for their friends. She called loudly to Grace Kim and other neighbors who'd been watching the confrontation with growing concern. Everyone witnessed this man claiming to be some kind of government official to avoid noise violations. The HOA has responsibility for community peace that overrides personal connections. I'm calling the real authorities to investigate false impersonation and continued noise violations. Sandra began dialing frantically, her movements becoming more erratic as her manufactured reality collided with Connor's documented expertise. Yes, I need police for someone impersonating a city official to continue illegal noise disturbance. Connor watched with professional fascination as she doubled down on false reporting while standing next to the wreckage of municipal equipment she'd just destroyed. Sandra, you're filing additional false complaints while standing next to evidence that your original complaint was incorrect. I know what I researched. Community noise protection is serious business. And I won't be intimidated by fake badges and made-up measurements. Each word created additional documentation for the harassment charges Connor was building. But he could see the deeper pain driving her behavior. Grace Kim approached cautiously, her social worker instincts obviously recognizing the psychological dimensions of Sandra's breakdown. Connor, is everything all right? Connor showed her his municipal credentials and sound meter readings with the calm professionalism that had diffused thousands of similar situations. I'm the county noise control officer. Mrs. Mitchell has been filing false violation reports. Grace's professional training activated immediately as she assessed the situation. Sandra, you know Connor's gatherings are always respectful. This is about your custody situation, isn't it? Sandra's face flushed with embarrassment and rage at having her personal trauma exposed. Don't psychoanalyze me. This is about protecting community standards. Connor's neighbor Mike Rodriguez joined them with obvious relief flooding his features. Thank God someone finally stood up to her. She's filed noise complaints about my lawnmower, my children playing, even my air conditioning unit. Lawnmowers during daytime hours aren't regulated unless they exceed 70 decibels. Connor confirmed with technical precision. Air conditioning units have separate ordinances that don't apply to residential systems. Grace began recording the confrontation for evidence while maintaining her professional composure. The situation was clearly escalating beyond a simple neighbor dispute into something requiring official intervention. Connor established clear objectives as the situation evolved. Document Sandra's false reporting and equipment destruction for municipal prosecution. Second, educate the HOA about actual noise regulations versus invented standards. Third, to protect community gathering rights through official channels while addressing the underlying psychological factors driving Sandra's behavior. He texted Lieutenant Torres, "Need backup for false reporting and property destruction. HOA member destroyed city equipment." Torres responded immediately, "En route. Document everything for multiple charges." Connor began comprehensive evidence gathering, while Sandra continued her false complaints, unknowingly building the case against herself with every word she spoke to the 911 dispatcher. Lieutenant Torres arrived in his patrol unit within minutes. Immediately recognizing Connor from their professional collaboration on noise ordinance enforcement, a fellow veteran with 15 years of community policing experience, Torres understood both the legal and personal dimensions of the situation unfolding in Connor's backyard. "Connor, what's the situation?" Torres approached with the respect. One professional shows another, his presence immediately commanding attention from the gathered neighbors. "Lieutenant, this is Sandra Mitchell. She's been filing false noise violation reports, destroying municipal equipment, and harassing community members with fabricated ordinances." Connor showed Torres his sound measurement data and equipment damage documentation with systematic precision. She attacked calibrated city acoustics equipment during a compliant memorial gathering, claiming violations that don't exist in any municipal code. Torres examined Connor's destroyed speakers and mixing board with professional concern. Recognizing the expensive calibrated equipment from their joint training sessions, this equipment is worth several $1,000s and calibrated for official municipal use. Sandra interrupted desperately, her voice reaching hysteria levels. "Officers, these men are conspiring to cover up serious noise violations. I demand real investigation of illegal sound equipment." Torres turned to her with measured patience, born from years of dealing with delusional complaints. "Ma'am, I work directly with Mr. Blake on noise ordinance enforcement. He's our senior acoustic specialist. But I researched everything: community noise protection, HOA enforcement authority, residential sound limits. Ma'am, show me your certification in noise control assessment." Sandra faltered as reality crashed through her manufactured expertise. "I don't need certification. I have HOA authority and community responsibility. Noise violation assessment requires specialized training, calibrated equipment, and municipal authorization. Community responsibility doesn't qualify you to destroy city property." Torres began documenting the equipment destruction, while Connor provided technical analysis of actual versus claimed violations. To building a comprehensive case that would protect other residents from similar harassment, Officer Diana Walsh arrived as backup, bringing experience with domestic disputes and false reporting cases that had prepared her for exactly this type of psychological breakdown. Her training in de-escalation would prove crucial as Sandra's mental state continued deteriorating. "Lieutenant Torres, what's the scope of this incident?" Torres briefed her while Connor provided technical documentation of the destroyed equipment and false violation claims. "Suspect has been filing false noise complaints for 8 months, destroyed municipal property, and harassed community members with fabricated ordinances." Walsh reviewed Sandra's false violation notices with growing alarm. These citations reference non-existent noise regulations and claim enforcement authority that doesn't exist in any municipal framework. Connor showed her his real-time acoustic measurements with professional clarity. Current ambient sound level is 32 decibels. Normal conversation generates more noise than my memorial gathering was producing. Sandra, realizing the situation was escalating beyond her control, called her divorce attorney in a panic that revealed her deeper fears. David, they're claiming I don't have authority for noise enforcement. You need to get down here immediately. This affects my custody case. Mrs. Mitchell, Walsh interrupted. You're under investigation for filing false reports and destroying municipal property. You have the right to remain silent. This is persecution. I'm protecting community standards because no one else will. Ma'am, show me one instance where actual community standards were violated. Sandra couldn't provide specific examples of genuine noise violations, only theoretical dangers she'd imagined based on internet research and her own custody-related anxiety about environmental control. Walsh's investigation expanded rapidly as more neighbors came forward with evidence of Sandra's harassment campaign, revealing a pattern of behavior that went far beyond noise complaints into comprehensive community control attempts. The Martinez family provided documentation of Sandra threatening legal action over their quinceañera celebration, with obvious relief at finally being able to speak freely. She claimed our family gathering violated cultural noise ordinances and threatened immigration enforcement involvement. Connor reviewed their celebration documentation with professional thoroughness that immediately debunked Sandra's claims. Family celebrations are specifically protected under community gathering provisions. There are no cultural noise ordinances in any municipal code. The Johnson family showed recordings of Sandra demanding they remove their children's playground equipment because it generated illegal recreational noise during daytime hours. She claimed municipal authority over residential playground equipment and threatened code enforcement action. Mrs. Johnson reported with growing confidence. Walsh documented each false authority claim while coordinating with county social services given the custody implications. Sandra's behavior pattern suggested psychological distress requiring intervention beyond criminal prosecution. Mrs. Mitchell, you've claimed municipal powers over family celebrations, children's activities, and residential equipment. None of these claims have any basis in actual ordinances. Sandra's responses became increasingly desperate as the evidence mounted against her manufactured authority. Someone needs to maintain community order. If I can't protect my own grandchildren, at least I can protect this neighborhood from chaos. Grace Kim intervened with professional social worker insight that cut through Sandra's defensive facade. Sandra, this isn't about community protection. This is about your custody case and feeling powerless to create the controlled environment the court required. Connor provided Walsh with comprehensive documentation comparing Sandra's false citations against actual municipal noise ordinances. Every claim she'd made was either incorrect or completely fabricated, demonstrating systematic disregard for actual regulations in favor of personal control needs. Sandra's attorney, David Morrison, arrived looking confused and increasingly concerned as he assessed the criminal investigation unfolding around his client. Sandra, you said there was harassment about your HOA duties. This looks like a serious criminal matter. David, these people are trying to stop me from protecting community standards. They claim Connor is some kind of municipal officer, but I know he's just trying to avoid noise violations. Connor showed Morrison his municipal credentials and 8 years of enforcement history with calm professionalism that immediately convinced the attorney of his legitimacy. Sir, your client has been impersonating enforcement authority and filing false violation reports. Morrison's face went pale as he reviewed the evidence and realized the implications for Sandra's already troubled custody case. Sandra, you told me you had official training for community noise assessment. I do have training. I researched everything online. I know proper community standards. Ma'am, Walsh interjected. Online research doesn't constitute municipal certification. You've been claiming authority you don't legally possess while filing false reports about compliant activities. Morrison looked mortified as he realized his client's custody case complications were about to get significantly worse through criminal charges. Word spread quickly through Oakwood Heights about Sandra's false authority exposure and Connor's professional credentials. Neighbors who'd been intimidated by her threats began sharing their experiences openly, creating a comprehensive picture of systematic harassment that had affected dozens of families. The Henderson family revealed they'd canceled their anniversary party based on Sandra's false citation claiming evening gatherings violated residential noise curfews. We spent $2,000 on venue rental elsewhere because she threatened municipal enforcement action. Mr. Henderson reported with obvious frustration at the unnecessary expense. Connor confirmed their celebration would have been completely compliant with actual noise ordinances, demonstrating how Sandra's false expertise had cost the community both money and meaningful connections. Walsh gathered all parties for final documentation of Sandra's systematic fraud and equipment destruction. The confrontation took place in Connor's backyard. Surrounded by the destroyed municipal sound equipment that had triggered the entire investigation, Mrs. Mitchell, you've been claiming Noise Enforcement Authority for 8 months, filing false violation reports, and harassing community members with fabricated ordinances. You've also destroyed several $1,000s worth of calibrated municipal equipment. How do you respond to these allegations? Sandra's final defense was desperate deflection mixed with raw emotional pain that finally revealed her true motivation. I researched community noise protection extensively. I know more about maintaining safe environments than some bureaucrat who ignores real violations. Connor gestured toward his destroyed professional sound equipment with quiet authority that contrasted sharply with Sandra's hysteria. Sandra, show me one actual noise violation at today's gathering. The music was too loud. 38 decibels, 7 below daytime residential limits. The speakers were too big. Size doesn't determine compliance. Sound output does. Too many people gathered. Community gatherings aren't regulated by attendance unless they exceed property capacity or generate actual noise violations. Grace Kim approached Sandra with professional compassion that acknowledged her pain while maintaining boundaries. Sandra, this isn't really about noise violations. This is about your grandchildren and feeling powerless to create the controlled environment the court required for visitation. Sandra's mask finally cracked completely, revealing the devastated grandmother beneath the authoritarian facade. If I can't protect my own grandchildren from chaos, at least I should be able to protect this community. Someone needs to maintain standards. But you're not protecting anything, Connor said gently. You're destroying community connections through false enforcement. Lieutenant Torres announced the municipal response to Sandra's equipment destruction and false reporting campaign with the gravity the situation deserved. Mrs. Mitchell, you filed 42 false noise violation reports, destroyed calibrated municipal equipment worth $8,000, and harassed community members with fabricated enforcement authority. The county is pursuing multiple charges. Charges include destruction of municipal property under Colorado Statute 18-4-504, filing false reports under Statute 18-8-111, and harassment under Statute 18-9-111. Walsh placed Sandra under arrest for destruction of municipal property and filing false reports as her final emotional collapse played out before the entire community. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. Sandra faced multiple criminal charges, restitution for destroyed equipment, and likely complications for her custody case. Her fake noise expertise had resulted in real legal consequences that would follow her for years. The Oakwood Heights HOA held emergency meeting to address Sandra's unauthorized authority claims and systematic harassment of residents. Connor attended as expert witness to explain actual noise regulations versus fabricated enforcement. Board President Michael Chang announced immediate policy changes that would protect residents from future harassment. All future noise assessments will be conducted only by certified municipal authorities. No HOA member has authority to enforce noise regulations or destroy resident property. Connor received thank you letters from 31 families who'd been harassed by Sandra's false expertise. The Henderson family rescheduled their anniversary celebration with community support and Connor's professional sound consultation. Colorado courts sentenced Sandra to 120 days jail suspended, 400 hours, community service, and $6,000 in restitution for destroyed municipal equipment. She was banned from filing noise complaints without professional verification and required to attend counseling for her custody-related trauma. Her systematic harassment became case study in municipal training programs about false authority claims and the psychological factors that drive community abuse patterns. Connor's professional handling of the situation was featured in law enforcement journals as an example of de-escalation, through expertise rather than force. Connor's memorial celebration was rescheduled for the following weekend, with the entire community invited to honor his father's memory and celebrate their newfound freedom from Sandra's harassment. The destroyed equipment was replaced by the municipality, and Connor's professional reputation was enhanced by his exemplary handling of the complex situation. His expertise in noise control expanded to include community mediation, helping other municipalities prevent HOA authority abuse through proper education and verification protocols. The precedent set by this case influenced state legislation requiring HOA board members to receive training on the limitations of their authority before taking office. This story illustrates why professional credentials matter in technical fields like noise control and community management. Sandra Mitchell confused internet research with expertise, leading to criminal charges and deeper personal pain. Her downfall wasn't caused by conspiracy. It was caused by claiming authority she didn't possess while avoiding the real psychological work needed to address her custody loss. Real expertise requires training, certification, and accountability that amateur enthusiasm can't replicate through online research. When someone claims technical authority, verify their actual credentials before accepting their enforcement claims. Have you encountered people who confused personal control needs with community authority? What would you have done in Connor's situation when facing someone whose false enforcement was driven by deeper pain? Share your own experiences with neighbors who let personal problems become everyone else's crisis. These situations happen everywhere. And learning how others handled similar problems helps everyone recognize and respond appropriately. Speaking of false authority, you won't believe what happened when a health department inspector tried to shut down a veteran's food truck without realizing the owner was a former military food service specialist who'd been documenting the inspector's own safety violations at city-approved events for months.